So after a sensationally bad performance against Brentford that even by Manchester United's recent standards has to be one of the great shithouse performances of all time, it now looks like the season is already going downhill. But it did seem inevitable that the season would go this way at some point, with United having arguably the worst summer rebuild of any club in recent memory. David De Gea was obviously the one mainly at fault for the loss against Brentford, and even though he was pretty good over the last year or so, this is something that many fans had predicted. And by many fans, I mean me. But before I get into that, I have got a special announcement from the sponsors of today's video, OneFootball, which is now the place where on a Saturday night, if you're in the UK or Ireland, you can watch one free Italian Serie A game each weekend. As well as this, you can also use all the other football features that I've spoken about before with OneFootball. So if you are interested in watching European football, but just don't have anywhere to watch it, then you can go to the competition page linked in the description, and you can check out the free match that will be streamed this weekend. You can also watch highlights of all the Serie A games, and near live instant clips as well whilst the games are going on. And by downloading the OneFootball app, you will be helping to support the channel. Back when Ten Hag was first appointed, I made a video on why David De Gea may need to be replaced. Now if you go through the comments, you'll see people laughing and mocking my opinion, saying that De Gea was the last player that United needed to replace. Well, I think it's painfully obvious now that those commenters had about as much knowledge of Ten Hag's system as Maguire has pace and McTominay has passing ability. The real issue is that, as Ranić said, United literally need 8 to 10 players brought in this summer. Fred and McTominay just aren't good enough, even to be squad players really, and should have been the first to be shipped out. Yet somehow they are both still ahead of Van der Beek and Garner in the pecking order. Maguire, well, do I even need to go into him? Literally the only reasons he's still at the club, let alone starting, is because he's club captain and cost £80 million. I would literally rather have one of Varane, Lindelof or Bailly starting ahead of him. Now United would have to take a bigger loss than the one they took against Brentford on Maguire, lucky to even probably get around £20 million, and would probably have to subsidise his wages as well, but I'd be willing to pay out of my own pocket just to ship him off somewhere else. Wan-Bissaka is another that should have been moved on this summer. He's been at Manchester United 3 seasons now, and his technique is still like Bambi on ice. He'd have to improve so much in such a short time frame that I just don't even think it's worth trying with him. Now Luke Shaw actually has ability. Even against Brentford he showed that on the ball at least he's very quick with his 1-2s and can carry the ball forward at speed. However, when it comes to his defensive positioning, I think the thought of a McDonald's breakfast the next morning blocks out his sense of defensive duty, and he has a complete inability to just run back goal side and stop the attacker running off of him. And just for lack of game intelligence, which shows no sign of improving, I would have shipped Luke Shaw off somewhere else as well. Maybe United could have run up a bidding war between Burger King and McDonald's, because I think United would struggle to get more than £25 to £30 million for him at the moment. David De Gea ideally would have been moved on as well. The fans wouldn't have liked it, but there's a reason clubs don't run their transfer policy through what people say on Twitter. I will go through the keeper as well as the other players I would have brought in later on in the video, but let's first carry on with the culling. In my opinion, Rashford and Martial are far too inconsistent and can't be relied upon, and I think they could have brought in £80 to £100 million between them, especially with PSG reportedly being willing to pay upwards of £60 million for Rashford. So now we are left needing a goalkeeper, a right back, 2 central midfielders, a wide attacker and a centre forward, on top of Malacia, Martinez and Eriksen, who I just assume have already been brought in this circumstance. I'd have just gone with Malacia as a starting left back and would have just promoted Alvaro Fernandez to the first team as a backup. Lisandro Martinez and Rafael Varane should be the starting centre backs, with Lindelof and Bailly as the backups. I think Diego Dalot is good enough to be the understudy at right back for now, but United should have been looking for an upgrade in that position. James Garner, Donny van der Beek and possibly Fred as well should have been the alternative central midfield options behind 2 new signings. Eriksen and Fernandes should be vying for that advanced playmaker role, though I do think that Mejbri could have been given a chance in the first team as well, although a loan move probably does suit him better. Out wide, Sancho would really be the only nailed on starter, with a new signing being needed on the opposite flank, and Elanga and Garnacho being the backup options as wingers. Ronaldo obviously would have been the centre forward, but with Antony Martial and Marcus Rashford being sold and Greenwood doing whatever he's doing, another centre forward would still have to be brought in. So that's 6 players plus Eriksen, Malacia and Martinez that would need to be brought in, which shows just the scale of the rebuild that was needed and shows just how right Ranić was. So let's get into what I would have done this summer. So we'll start off with the goalkeeper, and my number 1 option would have been Robert Sanchez at Brighton. He likely would have cost between £35 and £40 million, but would have been on significantly lower wages than David De Gea. He is only 24 as well, and has massive potential, and he excels in the areas where De Gea is poor. First of all, he has much better ball playing ability, both in the build-up with his short passes, as well as when moving the attack forward quickly with longer passes or throws upfield. We can get a good idea of how comfortable he is with his feet, as his FB Ref report shows he ranks in the 88th percentile for touches, meaning that in the Brighton system, Sanchez is used to playing out from the back, the exact build-up style of Ten Hag. In comparison, David De Gea ranks in the 1st percentile for touches. Need I say more? Sanchez also sits in the 90th percentile for percentage of crosses stopped, as well as the 67th for defensive actions outside the area, showing he's a perfect keeper for taking pressure off his centre-backs from crossing situations, which would definitely suit playing behind Lisandro Martinez. And we can also see from this that he's comfortable playing the sweeper keeper role, which would allow Ten Hag's backline to squeeze further up the pitch, making the aggressive press a lot more effective. David De Gea on the other hand ranks in the 4th percentile for crosses stopped, and the 5th percentile for defensive actions outside of the box, which is a great indication that goalkeeping is not just simply about shot stopping in the modern game. By selling David De Gea and Henderson this summer, United could definitely have raised around £40 million and got huge wages off of the books, which would have more than paid for Robert Sanchez's transfer fee and salary. I do think that Lisandro Martinez is a fantastic signing at centre-back, even if United did slightly overpay. And I also think that Malacia is a great signing as well, as United did get him at a great price, so it probably balances it out. But at right-back, I would have brought in Malo Gusto from Lyon. He's only 19 years old and he's a superb defender, both positionally when stopping through balls in behind him, and in one-on-one defending situations. His FB Ref report shows he produces a high quantity of defensive actions, in particular ranking very highly for interceptions and pressures, which would definitely suit Ten Hag's high pressing style. His output in the final third is just as good, as he ranks in the 92nd percentile for progressive carries and the 78th for dribbles, showing his ability to move the ball forward with it at his feet. He ranks incredibly highly as well for expected assists, sitting in the 95th percentile, and a lot of these chances that are created come from his low or floated crosses on the overlap, suggesting to me that he'd be the perfect right back to play behind Jadon Sancho, who thrived when having Achraf Hakimi bursting down his outside on the right at Borussia Dortmund. Gusto has a contract at Lyon until 2024, so would likely only cost around £30 million, which I think would have been an absolute bargain for United this summer. For the central midfielders, I would have targeted a player like Frenkie De Jong, who could play as a ball progressor, being a player to drop off and aid the build-up around the box, alongside a more physically industrious ball winner, who while still being a fantastic on-the-ball player, could provide the ability to break up the attack that United desperately lack with Fred and McTominay in midfield. Hassam Aouar, who now looks like he's going to Nottingham Forest, would have been my ideal central midfielder. He, like Frenkie De Jong, is incredibly press resistant, able to use his low centre of gravity, close ball control and awareness of the opposition player's positioning to wriggle out of pressure, which is exactly what United need from that deep connector midfielder in the build-up, as right now Fred, McTominay and even Christian Eriksen, as shown against Brentford, are sitting ducks when they receive the ball in this area. The other central midfielder I would have brought in would have been Ibrahim Sangare, who literally only just signed a new contract for PSV on August the 7th, and prior to that I reckon he'd be gettable for around 35 million. With Aouar having 1 year left on his contract, I reckon £25 million would have been enough to get him, which means for £60 million United could have brought in Sangare and Aouar, a midfield double pivot that would have been everything you'd want in a Premier League central midfield. Sangare is a defensive monster, ranking 3rd for tackles last season in the Eredivisie when compared against every other central midfielder with 3.5 per 90, also recording a very impressive tackle success rate of 76%. He also topped the list for interceptions with 2.8 per 90, showing that whether it comes to breaking up attacks by putting in a strong tackle or reading the game to intercept a pass, Sangare can do both, making him the perfect partner for Aouar, who is much more of a Frenkie De Jong roaming playmaker type, who can advance the ball forward with his dribbles through the centre of the pitch. But Sangare can also do this, as seen as he completed the 6th most dribbles of any Eredivisie central midfielder last season, with 1.8 per 90, though he does this a lot more through his athleticism and power, whereas Aouar's silky ball control and swift body movements allow him to do this in much more congested areas. But Sangare's defensive capabilities would also allow Aouar to venture further forward, where his output in the final third for Lyon at least has been impeccable. Over the past 365 days, he ranks in the mid to high 90s for dribbles, progressive carries, non-penalty goals and expected assists, whilst he also sits in the 72nd percentile for progressive passes. He certainly isn't phenomenal defensively, but I think alongside Sangare, United would have a double pivot that is capable of fulfilling the task needed all over the pitch, both in and out of possession. As a wide attacker, despite Ten Hag seemingly having Antony as his first choice, I just think Ajax's price tag of around €80 million is far too much, and instead I would have looked at another one of Ten Hag's former wide attackers in Hakim Ziyech. Ziyech is 29, 30 in March, but there are reports that Chelsea would be willing to allow him to leave for around £10 million, and given that he's a winger who doesn't rely on his pace or acceleration, but more on his passing and vision, I think United could easily get another good 3 to 4 seasons from him. He, unlike Sancho, isn't going to be a wide attacker who utilises his pace to run in behind the back line. However, Ten Hag does like to instruct his wide players in the front three to hold a wide position in the attack, and so Ziyech would definitely suit this role, being able to receive the ball to feet on the right and either cut in to produce a through ball or switch play, or even being capable of putting in an in-swinging cross towards the back post. His FBref report shows that despite being in and out of the Chelsea team over the past season or so, he is still producing a pretty good level of output, ranking in the 83rd percentile for expected assists, the 87th for progressive passes, the 58th for progressive carries, and the 76th for dribbles. Now these aren't extraordinary numbers, but certainly his chance creating and progressive passing numbers show that Ziyech is still capable of top level output. He seems like a shrewd, value for money signing that would probably provide exactly what United would need from the right side, whilst also being available at a bargain price, so I can't understand why United haven't bitten off Chelsea's hand when they saw this deal was available. For the centre forward, I would have gone for Luka Jovic, who eventually signed for Fiorentina from Real Madrid on a 2-year loan, where each side will pay half of his €5 million salary. United would probably have to take on his full salary, but even still I think a 2-year loan deal would be a fantastic deal for a 24-year-old striker who just a few seasons ago looked like one of the best up-and-coming goal scorers in Europe. He'd be the perfect alternative to Ronaldo up front, coming off the bench to partner Ronaldo in certain games, and would provide a goal-scoring threat around the box, which is exactly what United lack at the moment. Obviously, he may not be the long-term Ronaldo replacement, but I think having Ronaldo and Jovic as your two centre-forward options is an excellent combination. Also, just quickly, there are now reports that Malo Gusto would cost significantly more, but I think that's mainly down to how late in the window it is. But let's just assume that United would have to still pay £40 million had they signed him earlier on in the window. I still think it's a good deal in my eyes. So that would roughly be an expenditure of around £210 to £230 million, which, considering they are now looking to throw the kitchen sink at it, targeting Antony and Casermiro for huge fees, I think it would definitely have been possible, obviously under different owners of course. But also once you factor in the near £120 to £140 million roughly that United could have raised from the sales of Rashford, Martial, De Gea, Henderson, etc., then this seems like a rebuild that would definitely have been possible. So let me know what you think of my rebuild in the comment section below. Check out some of my other videos in the description, give the video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel and click the bell for more videos like this as well.